So I've always been kind of unconventional and kind of just gone on my own path. So again, back to law school, I was actually voted least likely to practice law because I've always been unconventional, and I knew I wanted a law degree, but I didn't want to be tied down to the traditional structure. I'm still very much so practicing law, but just kind of on my own terms.
Welcome to Side Hustle Hero, the show that is laser focused to inspire you to take action to start or to scale your side hustle income streams. I'm your host, Joan Posivy, author of The Way Success Works. This episode with trademark attorney Derrick Morgan is quite unique. Instead of the traditional, conventional life of an attorney, clocking in a ton of hours in an office or cubicle, Derrick spends most of his time working and traveling in countries around the globe. He's already been in 9 countries this year, with plans to travel to another 10 before year's end, all the while being a Fiverr top seller. I hope that part of the interview will challenge your perception of what a traditional professional job needs to look like. If travel and working from remote locations around the world is more your style, but you feel unable to do so in your line of work, let this episode be an inspiration and idea generator for you. Then in the second part of the conversation, Derrick tells us a lot about getting a trademark for our company name, our brand, including what you need to trademark and when, as well as the upfront costs and renewals you'll face. Now here is my conversation with the traveling trademark attorney, Derrick Morgan. Well, welcome, Derrick.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So what country are you hanging your hat in today?
I am currently in Mexico City, Mexico.
Oh, very nice. You down there for a while for a holiday or?
I've been down here since October, and I probably have about another month or 2 left, and then I'll head back to Chicago when it warms up.
Oh, wow. I understand you travel quite a bit while you're working online. Is that true?
Yes. This year I've been to about 9 countries, and I plan on, maybe doing another 10 or so for the rest of 2023.
Wow. So Chicago is like home base?
Mexico City is more home base, but Chicago is where I own a home. So it's a bit of a hybrid situation right now.
Okay. Well, when I think of a U.S. attorney, what comes to mind is someone holed up in an office tower somewhere, toiling day and night. Was that ever the reality for you?
Yes. So when I started my career back in 2018, very much so traditional law, going in to a law firm, not every day, but maybe 3 times a week. And I was allowed to work remotely or from home the other 2 days. So I actually had a flexible situation starting out, but still very much so the traditional practice of law.
Right. And so when did you switch to this basically traveling the world and working online?
I did have a flexible situation. So I was traveling while I was at the law firm that I started my career at. However, maybe it would be 2 or 3 countries a year, but now it's substantially more countries than that. So around 2020, like right after during the pandemic, but when restrictions started to ease up a bit, I started traveling a lot more, and then it went to about 5 countries a year to 6 countries a year, and then we're up to about 10 and hopefully 20 this year.
And are you still working for a firm, or do you have your own business now?
Yeah, so I have my own practice, but I do not work for anyone else besides myself.
Is it fairly common what you're doing in the law world?
No, not really. I have friends that have private practices.
Okay.
However, I don't think many of them source their clients through freelancing. So yeah, it's pretty rare, but it is possible if you know what to look for.
Because I'm thinking that so many people in kind of traditional professions, such as lawyer, would think this is what I have to do, the corporate office, the big city or small town, but certainly not be traveling to like 10 or 20 countries in a year. And too often we put ourselves in these positions through a mental block, through a belief system. Like I remember when I owned a self-storage facility, I had at the time, unconscious belief that as long as I owned it, I had to live in that city. Until a number of circumstances changed and I realized, wait a minute, maybe I don't. So then the question just becomes, say in your case, how can I travel to 10 or 20 countries a year and create this thriving profession?
Yeah, it's actually funny you say that. When I graduated law school, I actually skipped graduation so I could go to Cape Town before the bar exam, because I felt like I had just graduated undergrad 3 years before, but I decided to go to Cape Town instead. And it's funny because when I was actually in Chicago over the summer, they had, an alumni event. And I was talking to the dean of students about, what I've been up to and whatnot. And she's like, "Oh yeah, I know you used to really like to travel. Are you still doing that?" I kind of told her my story, and she was really interested in it. So she wanted me to come speak to the students and kind of tell like a different story. So I thought that was pretty interesting and neat to hear from the dean of students.
Fantastic. Because yes, a lot of those graduating students, they wouldn't even think of being able to do what you're doing.
Right.
So suddenly it's okay, well, how many other things have I not even contemplated because I didn't think I could?
Right. Yeah, that's pretty spot on.
Was this always your plan from the start? Like when you started in law school, that eventually at some point you wanted to do this?
Not really. So I've always been kind of like unconventional and kind of just gone on my own path. So again, back to law school, I was actually voted least likely to practice law. So you know how they have like the senior superlatives or whatever? That's the one I got because I've always been unconventional, and I knew I wanted a law degree, but I didn't want to, be tied down to traditional structure. They voted that for me, and I'm still very much so practicing law, but just kind of on my own terms.
Yeah. Well, what, if any, downsides have you experienced in working on the road and not in a kind of like a localized office surrounded by your colleagues?
I wouldn't say there are many downsides. I kind of just own my life, own my schedule. It's very flexible. Maybe I don't have coworkers, so sometimes it can be a lot to take on everything by myself. But I've always been a pretty independent person, and I've hired help. I have a paralegal now. So it's that if there were a downside, that would probably be the only one. But I was actually thinking about this yesterday. In college, I was a student athlete. So maybe 6 months out of the year, we're bouncing around to another city for another track meet. So it's like kind of I've already been doing this remote work type of thing back in college, and it never really hit me until yesterday. I was like, oh, I've kind of been doing this for a while now.
It's kind of been in your blood all along.
Yeah, for sure.
And I would imagine you've got law associations and groups that you can connect with and brainstorm with as new things come across your desk that you haven't seen before or want other feedback from.
Yes, absolutely. I'm really big into mentorship. So I do have a mentor who is a traditional, attorney who works at a big law firm in Indianapolis. So if something, that comes up that is brand new to me, I can bounce those ideas off of him. And I also have friends that work in the same space as well.
Perfect. Sounds like you got the best of both worlds.
Yeah, I'd like to think so.
You've made just shy of $300,000 in earnings since joining Fiverr as a freelancer. Is that correct?
That was maybe a couple months ago. Now I'm around 330,000.
Sweet.
But yeah. So just under 3 years.
And you're not the least expensive on the platform. Actually, it looks like you're at the upper end of pricing. Yet you've assisted over 1,000 businesses and brands in over 50 countries with their trademarks. You have 700 reviews, virtually all 5-star. That's very impressive, Derrick.
Yeah, thank you.
To what do you attribute your success?
I think under promising, over delivering. The best referral you can get is a happy client that leaves a good review. So, a lot of people will come to me and say, "Hey, I hired you because I love your reviews. Everyone says you're really responsive and thorough in what you do." So I take pride in that and ensure that I keep that level of excellence with my clients, because then they'll come back to leave a good review, and then others will see that and will hopefully hire me.
And so when they take a look at the cost difference, then it's like, you know what? There is so much at stake that this be done right.
Right.
And you're way better off paying the extra, what in the big scheme of things is a tiny amount difference to know that you're getting the job done. Yeah,
for sure. And then some people will try to file by themselves, but sometimes it can be a lot more expensive to try to do it yourself, ruin the application. Then you have to do it a few more times or hire someone else to help you because you just don't really know what's going on. So it's easier to just hire someone who just knows what they're doing up front and gets it done. So, you can just focus on your business while I focus on your trademarks and intellectual property.
Perfect. Well, do you remember when that first gig came through, the first order?
Not exactly. I have had a lot, but I do remember the first month and kind of what that felt like.
How did that feel?
Felt great. So I started doing this during the pandemic just because of the work at my law firm was getting so slow. I was a litigator, so a lot of our work had to be done through the courts. Since the pandemic, shut everything down, the courts were shut down, so we could only do so much. So around, I don't know, maybe April, May of 2020, there was just like, I was still working on things, but I just had a lot more free time. And my cousin, she has a business. She's an entrepreneur as well. And she just kept begging me to do her trademark. And I was like, I have a background in intellectual property, but I don't really do that anymore. she kept begging me. So eventually I did it. And I was like, oh, that wasn't too bad. And I remember how to do it. So I was on Fiverr, but I wasn't really using it. So then I threw that service onto my profile. Not really a whole lot of traction at first, but when I got that first client, it picked up immediately. So I got that first client, then the second client, then the third client. I was like, oh, I could probably pay my cell phone bill once a month off of the earnings.
Yeah.
And then eventually it turned into my mortgage and my car note. And then eventually it was just like, okay, you're making more money on Fiverr in just a few months of doing it versus what you're making at the law firm.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually it just didn't really make sense to kind of have my hands in both baskets and focusing on both when I saw that it was sustainable and I could just go out on my own.
That's a good point too, because you were fairly new at this law firm, having not been a lawyer for that long. So you were probably working pretty long hours.
Yeah, we had a lot of ongoing litigation. So it wasn't the worst hours, but I was definitely working a lot.
Yeah.
So when everything slowed down, I had that free time to kind of venture out and see what else was out there.
Nice. Was it anything that you did in terms of promotion within Fiverr or SEO that you think helped generate more exposure for you to get all those clients?
Yeah, for sure. So when I started on Fiverr, just kind of like any brands out there, I went to look at the top profiles in my industry and just saw what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
Don't reinvent the wheel. See what the best people are doing and figure out a way how you can provide more value for a bit of a cheaper price. And then once you do that, people are going to be very excited to work with you because, they're getting a great deal. They're getting this great business deal for a cheaper price. So I went to find the best people on the platform, saw what they were doing, kind of reinvented it, and then just made sure that I was giving better service and offering more than they were.
Mm-hmm.
And also I was really always kind of fixing my page. So when I first started the page, not that it was rough or anything, but it had some rough edges. So
Sure.
every week I would go back to the page and figure out how can I make this better? How can I add more value? How can I make this look more professional? And I just kept doing that and kept doing that. And eventually I got to the point where I was like, okay, I think this looks pretty good right now. And I still do it, but not nearly as often.
Right.
So just making sure that your profile is professional so that the clients or the buyers can trust you and know that when they come to your page that they will get quality service. So those are kind of the two main things that I did to really get it off the ground. And then once you just have that good rhythm, clients will just keep coming into you.
Yeah. And must have loved that sense of freedom.
Yeah. Oh my God, it's amazing.
Well, I want to tap into your expertise about trademarks. At what point should someone with a side hustle trademark their brand, and what is it that we're actually trademarking?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd say when it's not a hobby so much anymore and you have an LLC and you want to be a legitimate business, because businesses that actually file a trademark, they make triple the profits of those that don't. And I don't think it's because they file the trademark. I think it's just because it shows that they're taking it more seriously. So I'd say once you know you want to be a legitimate business, get that trademark. And even if that's day one, if you have that intention of being a legitimate business, you want to get that trademark, because oftentimes clients will come to me and, they've been operating for 3 years, but they've been legit the whole time. But they're like, okay, I think I should take it more seriously now. I want to get this trademark, but the name's already taken. So, they're 3 years in and potentially, tens of thousands of dollars into branding their product or service, but they can't use that name. It can be quite devastating for some of those clients if they have a product or something that just has their trademark plastered all over it. And, you always want to avoid that cease and desist from the big corporation whose lawyers are very, strict enforcing their intellectual property rights. So I say, once you're taking that business seriously, you should file that trademark.
And so for our listeners outside of the United States that might not be familiar, then an LLC is essentially a corporation. And so what you're actually trademarking then is the actual company name and or logo?
There are several things that can be trademarked, but traditionally it would be, yes, your brand name or your logo. And that has to be in connection with the product or service. So you can't just go out there and trademark Walmart for all things possible that would ever use the name Walmart. You'd have to do it for Walmart branded products or Walmart, the retail store, etc.
Okay.
But it couldn't just be a trademark with no connection to a product or service.
So where should the entrepreneur start? Should they sort of take a look around and see if what they're using is out there already? What would you suggest?
That's a good question. I strongly recommend hiring a trademark attorney because a lot of people will go onto the trademark website and look up the name and they don't see a direct match. They think they're good to go.
Okay.
But the USPTO actually has a test that hinges on like the likelihood of confusion. So even though the names might not be identical, if they're similar, you cannot proceed with it. Or let's say the brand Nike exists as it does, and you want to start a brand called Sports Nike or Sports by Nike. Nike's in both of those names. Nike's never going to allow you to use their name, even though it's different. So a lot of people will confuse an LLC. You can file an LLC and just change one letter and you're good to go. But with a trademark, if there are any sort of similarities that could cause consumer confusion, then it's no go.
And the acronym that you tossed out there is the U.S. Patent and Trade Office?
Yes, the USPTO, correct.
Okay. So they could probably do a preliminary search to see if there is an exact match or something even similar. And then after that, then that's, I guess, where you would come in.
Yeah, you can do the direct hit search, but I mean, that's only worth so much. If you do see a conflict and it happens to be within your category, your industry, that's a huge red flag and you probably should not proceed with it. But it's so much deeper than that. And a lot of people don't realize that. A lot of people end up hiring me because they did not do that search and then they need some help on the back end. So, but I get why people do it.
Yeah. So what are the costs involved?
Well, yeah, it depends on what you order. So for a trademark, if you just want one product or service in one class, let's say you want to trademark Side Hustle Hero and entertainment services, that's a one class trademark.
Okay.
So that would be $500 for the lawyer's fees, and then you would have $250 for the government fee. So around $750 to get it off the ground.
Right.
Now, let's say Side Hustle Hero also has merchandise and you're selling t-shirts. So then that would increase your fees, $250 for the additional trademark class, but also $200 for the lawyer fees, because you also have to now expand that search from just entertainment services to also clothing.
Right.
So it depends on how many services you're offering. But if you're just doing one service or product, it's about $750.
And speaking of the trademark for Side Hustle Hero, I discovered that as a Canadian wanting to trademark it in the US, that I had to go ahead and hire a US attorney. I couldn't use the one I had here in Canada.
Yes, that's correct. If you do not live in the US, you do have to have a US licensed attorney.
Right.
US based applicants can file for themselves, but it's just like kind of going to court by yourself. You don't really want to do that because there's a lot of procedural issues that could happen and you just really won't know how to operate. But some people can do it by themselves and get pretty lucky and get it done. But 99% of people will need an attorney.
Yeah. If the person gets the trademark in the US, that just covers them in the US, correct?
Correct.
So they've got to go country to country.
Yes. If you are selling in other countries, you probably want to do that in those countries as well.
Well, I'm wondering how far we need to take that. So, for example, someone that was on the show very recently, Luke Hebert, he has a company called Unique Pet Portraits. They're out of the UK. And most of it, the majority of his clients are in the UK and Ireland. But he also has sales worldwide. So how far out do you go? Obviously, he would look to trademarks for those countries. But then I don't know, how do you wrap your head around how many countries, how much money you're going to spend country to country?
Yeah, so I typically tell clients to budget about $1,000 per country.
Okay.
Now, that's if you're making sales or if you're even advertising to those spaces. With the internet, you can be based in Wyoming, but you have clients in Indonesia. So if you are making sales in those countries or you intend to make sales in those countries, I would recommend maybe getting a trademark just so you have that brand protection but others aren't kind of ripping off your brand. So you want to have that protection if you are making sales, substantial sales in that country.
Are there some countries that tend to flaunt the trademark laws more than others? So we would lean towards getting a trademark in those countries to further protect, or no?
Can you restate the question, please?
Sure. That sounds very lawyerish.
Yeah, that's the litigator.
I'm just teasing
in me.
you. I'm just thinking that there's been countries that I've traveled to where you walk into these markets and they've got knockoffs of like absolutely everything. And I'm just wondering if there would be any point of even going to the expense and the time of putting a trademark in a country like that.
Right. I understand. So yeah, I think so. So, I mean, even in the States, you can go to markets and just find knockoff designer purses, clothing and all that.
True.
But the benefit of the trademark is, so if Border Patrol runs into this, they see that you're a registered trademark, they can seize all of that. Without the trademark, it's very unlikely that they will ever do that. It is important that you have that trademark because with those rights, that can help you out and you can get the knockoffs off the market. And even in countries like I'm based in Mexico and there are a lot of counterfeits out here. Same thing. It might be harder to enforce,
Okay.
but having that trademark will allow you to, seize things at the border.
Sure. Okay. Good point. Well, are there any annual fees or maintenance issues with a trademark?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So there's not an annual fee, but after the first 5 years, you have to renew your trademark. And then it's every decade after that. So it's 5 years, 10 years, 20, 30, 40. You have to renew it. If you don't, you lose the rights to the trademark.
Whoa. Okay. So that's something you want to pay attention to. Is that something we need to put on our calendars, or will the trademark offices notify us?
They send out a courtesy reminder. However, you might miss that 5 years from now and 10 years
Sure.
from now, you might have a totally different email address. They don't mail things as much anymore.
Okay.
So it is important to, keep that on your calendar, maybe on your phone or wherever you stay organized. It's definitely important to do that yourself because that courtesy reminder, once again, is a courtesy. They're not obliged to send that to you, but they typically do.
Yeah. Is that a service that you provide?
Yes, I do A to Z. So I do renewals, office actions, just about anything that comes in the door that is trademark.
How about the reminders?
So I have been practicing less than 5 years, so I have not had to do reminders just yet.
Yes.
However, I do the renewals. So clients will come to me and saying, hey, I'm on my 5-year renewal and I need to do this renewal. And then I will help them with that.
Yeah. What have you found have been some of the biggest mistakes or most common mistakes people made when they're trying to do the filing themselves?
The search, they will do the direct hit search and they will see that there are marks similar, but they're not identical. And, that comes down to pronunciation, look, commercial impression. It's not just all about the spelling. So I know a lot of people just try to change the spelling, not realizing that will get their trademark denied. So people really struggle with, or not even struggle, they just don't know that those rules exist. And they think that because they could have filed the LLC and they got the LLC quite easily, that they can also get the trademark. And that's just not the case. It all comes down to a likelihood of confusion, which basically means what a common consumer kind of see the two products and what they think that they come from the same source. And if they do, the USPTO is likely to kind of deny that mark because, that's what people are filing a trademark for. They don't want anyone being able to come into their space with a similar name and taking profits.
Right. How long is it taking now from the time you file to it's actually approved?
Yeah, it's a lot longer now. So at the very fastest, 10 months.
Okay.
But it can take almost up to 2 years sometimes. But when I first started practicing, you could do the whole process within 8 months, sometimes even as short as 6. But a lot of people are starting businesses after the pandemic. I think there's around 12 to 1,500 trademarks filed a day. So there's a lot out there. So it takes the USPTO about 8 months to even look at your application. And then once they do that, it's a lot quicker. But yeah, it takes quite some time these days.
So once it's filed, I would be like in a queue then. If someone during that 8 months or 2 years also files an application for the same or very similar name, because I got in there first, will mine take precedent?
Yes. However, the person who files after you could potentially oppose the trademark. So let's say you have two brands, similar names. Brand 1 files first. Obviously, brand 2 files 3 months after. But let's say brand 2 has existed for 15 years and brand 1 has existed for 3 years. They could still have superior rights and they can come forward and say, hey, we don't like that this trademark is similar to ours, even though they filed before us. We would like to oppose this trademark. And then you basically have to go through kind of like a mini court case, trying to figure out who has the superior rights to the name. And the USPTO will rule on a decision and let you know who gets the precedent on that.
Yeah, interesting. What's the best way for our listeners to connect with you, Derrick?
I can send my Fiverr profile. You can just shoot me a message on there. That would probably be the best way.
Okay, great. Well, through all you've done and your ability to take a look at the law profession in a different way than a lot of your colleagues, you certainly are someone who knows how to step out and get things done. What's your best tip to inspire others to pursue their side hustle dreams?
Oh, that's a good question. The best advice I would say to give someone wanting to get out there on their side hustle is to really just do the research first.
Okay.
A lot of people try to start side hustles just purely based on passion. And I'm not saying that's a bad idea. Just make sure that there's some sort of a demand for that service or that product. Because without the demand, it's just a hobby and no one's really buying it and you're not side hustling, you're just doing something for fun. But when that demand is there, you can really kind of move mountains with that. So there is a function on Fiverr, actually. I think it's called keyword search.
Okay.
So you can kind of go on there and look into the high demand services, what people are going on Fiverr and looking for. And then you can also see how much competition is in that specific service. So if you go on Trademarks, you'll see that it's very highly searched, but there's low competition because only so many people can do that. So that's a good side hustle to kind of get into because, it's in high demand and there's not a lot of people doing it.
Right.
So I say to really just kind of figure out what's in demand and how you can monetize the skills that you currently have or the ones that you're willing to learn, make those match up and jump out there and get that side hustle going.
That's a great tip. Well, thank you so much, Derrick, for inspiring us to, I think, look at our careers and our professions in a new way. And
thank you.
And thank you for being today's Side Hustle Hero.
Sounds good. I appreciate it. And thank you for your time.
For some people, making a living through Fiverr while at the same time traveling the world would be like a dream come true. Derrick shows us that that's totally doable. Yet others, maybe like yourself, love exactly where you're living right now and don't want to move, but maybe you just want to incorporate more travel into your life, or you want to change your lifestyle in some way. What does your ideal lifestyle look like? Really think about that. If you felt completely at choice, what kind of work are you doing? Where? With who? How are you serving? In my book, The Way Success Works, I have you explore 7 different areas of your life and ask you a series of questions to really get you thinking about, designing your life, something you can do and should do. You can design every aspect of it. I mentioned that I did not know that I was harboring the belief that as long as I owned my self-storage facility, I needed to live in that city. I never entertained the idea of moving until one day a real estate agent reached out to me and said, I have clients who want to buy your facility. We talked a bit, but I told him it wasn't for sale. About 6 months or so later, he called back. Only this time, he asked for my email address because he wanted to send me an offer to purchase signed by his clients for exactly the amount I had told him previously it was worth. I gave him my email address, and when I got the offer, I read through it. And I got to tell you, it was tempting, but I still said no. But the difference this time was that now I had an offer in my hot little hands, and that got me thinking, if I sold, what would I do? And the immediate response was, I'd move. I'd move to where I'm now living. That's when I had that moment that I had this unconscious belief that I had to stay put while I owned the facility. If it weren't for that real estate agent, I might still be living there. No, don't get me wrong. It's a beautiful place and many people dream of living there. But for me, it was time to move on. So then the thinking changed to how, not if, how can I continue to own the facility and move to where I really want to live? Once I did that, it was a relatively short period of time until I made the move. All it took really was the will to do it and changing a few systems, and I was on my way. So again, I ask you, what does your ideal lifestyle look like? Write it out exactly how you'd like it, and only then start to brainstorm the how. I'll leave you this quote from the late Wernher von Braun, considered by many to be the father of the space program. He said, I have learned to use the word impossible with the greatest caution. Take his words to heart, and you'll craft your life into something magnificent. Well, that's a wrap for today. You'll find a link to Derrick's Fiverr page as well as the show notes on our website, sidehustlehero.com. And I'd love to hear your feedback on the show, on the guests, how this podcast is helping you. What areas could we do better? Shoot me an email message to hello@joanposivy.com or by DM on Instagram @JoanPosivy. Thanks for listening, and hustle on.